Hi, everyone, and welcome to UBS Trending. I'm Anthony Pastore. There is a word that can potentially give many of us a sense of joy and relief, while at the same time, maybe a little bit of stress and angst. That word is retirement. Certainly, this is a topic that resonates with us all, but how many of us are ready financially for retirement? Of course, putting aside the emotional readiness. So let's bring in my next guest, Mike Griffin, the head of sales and relationship management with the retirement plan consulting business at UBS. Hey, Mike, thank you so much for joining us. This is a huge topic, and I think, as we were just saying before we started today, one that a lot of folks maybe aren't thinking about. So I'm really looking forward to getting into the data here with you. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you, Anthony. I'm excited to be on the program today. Thanks for having me, and I'm excited to talk about this topic with you.
Yeah, good. And look, this is, I think, a topic that this is important for everyone. So I want to start with this really interesting statistic, and it's according to the nation's retirement system. It's a report that's issued by the U.S. Government Accountability Office, and it says many Americans may face a more difficult retirement than their parents enjoyed. I don't think any of us are unfamiliar with the fact that we don't have as much pension benefit. Those programs are not really as popular as they were. Certainly when my parents were working full time, there are potential cuts in Social Security benefits. There's also ongoing rising healthcare costs. So the question to you, Mike, is how big of a problem is this really? And are we approaching a retirement crisis, for lack of a better word, in this country?
Look, I believe, Anthony, that we are approaching a retirement crisis. I mean, when you look at the industry overall, we just don't have enough, number one, people saving for retirement plans, and we don't have enough in those retirement plans to allow people to adequately retire. In fact, if you were to look at the overall state of the retirement plans, here's the good news. The good news is that we have 100 million participants that are participating in defined contribution or 401k plans today. And that represents about $9.6 trillion in assets. Now, while that may sound like a big number, here's the disturbing part. According to the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, still 33% of Americans don't have access to any type of retirement plan program today. That's a huge issue that we're facing today. But then if you look at it, the 68% of the private industry workers that do have access to retirement plans, only 51% of those are choosing to participate. So only about half of the 68% are participating. Now, when we look at the state or employer plans, that number goes up a little bit. So about 92% are offered some type of retirement savings plan. But see, here's the issue. Only 82% are participating. So yeah, to answer your question, I believe that we are coming up against a retirement plan crisis because not enough people have the ability to save, even if they wanted to. And then when they do have the ability to save, only about half are really taking advantage of these retirement plans.
Yeah, I mean, those numbers are really staggering, Mike. Not only is it that fact that 1/3 of all private employees don't have access at all, but those that do, half of them aren't even taking advantage of these opportunities. So what about, okay, let's talk about those who do have access, because clearly the ones that don't, that's a much bigger conversation. But for those that do, and they do participate in one, is their situation much better than those that aren't?
Yeah, that's a great question. The answer is no. I mean, if you look at the average 401k balance, here's the good news. The good news is that the average balances are up. In fact, a study was done of about 5 million participants. And of those 5 million participants, we saw that the average account balance was up. But the problem is it was only up to $129,000 in 2020. The good news is this is up from 2019, where it was about $106,000. But look, we all know that this is not enough money to retire off of. In fact, as the chart shows, the balances differ compared to the average age and the age that you get. But the bottom line is that the median balance for retirement plan savings is only $82,297. the experts tell us that we need about 80% of our average monthly income to live off of. This is not enough.
Oof. Yeah, I mean, I'm looking at these numbers just as you are, Mike, and it makes me, it gives me sort of like a little bit of nervousness. I think about people who are in that situation and they want to retire maybe at 65 or even 70, and a lot of people are living a lot longer these days as we have better health care, but also those health care costs are higher because of the fact that we're living so much longer. So I'm really happy that you're. Happy is probably not the right word, but I'm glad that you're sharing that news with us because I think it might make people open their eyes a little bit more. But here, it does sound like maybe there's a little better news here. And as you said, the numbers are going up slowly but surely. But to retire comfortably, what you said is about 80% of one's final pre-retirement annual income. But going back to those employees who don't even have access to a retirement plan, is there anything that the government is doing to help? Because as we can imagine, if you have all of those people have no access to any funding at all, that really is going to be an economic crisis in this country.
Yeah, that's extremely true. And basically, there are three things that are being done. And we'll talk about them a little bit in detail. But if you think about it overall, the three things are, number one, instituting state mandates. The second thing is the creation of multiple employer plans. And the third thing is the creation of pooled employer plans. And we saw that creation in Secure Act 2.0. And let's talk about those a little bit in detail and what we talk about state mandates. So we've seen the creation of state mandates. And although they're not required by all states, we've seen the adoption of these from many of the states across the United States. And here's the interesting thing. So when an employer has the ability to implement a retirement plan, what the state is saying is that you can do one of two things. So number one, you can adopt a 401k plan or a defined contribution from a private employer. Or the second thing is that you can adopt the state mandated retirement plan. Either one you choose, the overall requirement is that you have to have some type of retirement plan to allow access to the employees to be able to participate in these plans. And the interesting thing is when you look at this, it's gotten very wide approval from the people that have been surveyed about that. In fact, 72% of Americans agree that state facilitated retirement programs are a good idea. And not only that, 75% of those people said that if they were offered this type of retirement plan, that they would participate in a retirement plan. Now, this is exciting news because this is up from the 51% that we saw earlier. So 3/4 of Americans say if I was offered this type of retirement plan, they would participate. Now, what does this mean to us as a nation? This means that we would increase retirement savings from anywhere between $1.5 trillion to about $2 trillion by the year 2040. Not only that, we would accelerate economic growth in the market, and then we would also reduce the cost of demand within state employer plans by about $7 to $9 billion a year. These are huge savings when we look at instituting state mandates. And although many states have not enacted it, we see them becoming widely adopted. The second thing that we see is the creation of multiple employer plans. And when you think about multiple employer plans, what are multiple employer plans? Basically, they're where two different employers or two different companies within the same industry come together to create a retirement plan. Now, why is this beneficial? It is in a couple of different ways. So number one, it reduces the administrative burden on a company for having a retirement plan. And then secondly, and probably most importantly, is that the retirement plan is priced based off of the totality of the retirement plan. So the bigger the assets grow, the lower the fees. And this is important for smaller companies because they'll receive the economic benefits as if it was a larger company with a large amount of assets. And then the third thing that we see is the creation of the pooled employer plan. And this was in response to the adoption of the multiple employer plan. And that it's kind of the cousin of the multiple employer plan. But instead of having to be in the same industry, the pooled employer plan allows companies of in different industries to come together and form a retirement plan. So you no longer have to be in the same industry. You're able to pool those assets and reduce the fiduciary liability, reduce the administrative burden, but also you don't have to be in the same industry, which is exciting news. And we've seen a large adoption of this, and the Secure Act was passed in 2021. So it really gives access to a lot of the small employers that typically find retirement plans too expensive or don't have the resources to deal with the administrative task of a 401k plan, and allows them to institute retirement plans. Now, Anthony, here's the interest. It helps address the 5 to 6 million companies that don't have a retirement plan. And we see that only 650,000 plans have some type of retirement plan today. So this is what we're seeing in creation to deal with the retirement plan crisis that we've been talking about.
Yeah, you know what, Mike? It's good to hear that there are some considerations being made and there's some options out there because, and I'm sure you know this, but to tell our audience, there was a report done in 2021 called the Social Security's Trustees Report, and it said that in 2034, unless Congress acts, retirees will only receive 78% of their Social Security benefits. So it's going to be harder and harder for folks to rely on Social Security as their main source of retirement income. So to see that there are options on the table, and look, for those who have access to 401k plans and the like, it's time to really start taking action. It's never too late to get started. So let me ask you, Mike, as we're wrapping up here, as we've been talking about some really good insights here and some interesting information that I think is a wake-up call for many people who are watching, but how would you summarize the retirement savings situation, or even more specifically, the retirement savings rate in the U.S. right now?
Yeah, the retirement savings rate, I mean, as we've talked about today, we are facing a huge dilemma. In fact, I like to call it a crisis, that if we don't do something about the amount of people not only having access to retirement plans, but also the ability to save for those and the average balance, we're going to have to increase those rates because more and more people are relying on Social Security to be their primary benefit, which, as you just stated, we're not even positive will be here in the future. So something has to be done. Something has to be done immediately. And hopefully together, by educating employers that are out there on the many different options that we have available today, we can help solve this crisis together.
Yeah, Mike, thank you very much. Again, a big wake-up call for a lot of folks. I hope many of you out there are heeding some of these I wouldn't say warnings, but certainly some eye-opening information that might get you thinking differently about how to save for your retirement. Mike, thanks for joining me. Good to see you.
Absolutely.
Great, terrific. And for more information and access to a lot of the content that Mike and I spoke about, plus more from UBS, you can visit our website at ubs.com/views, and make sure to follow us on social media, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn. We're all over that. Plus, you can check out our past UBS Trending episodes on demand on our website, ubs.com/studios, and on the UBS YouTube channel. And as always, if you have any questions about your own portfolio or your retirement savings, make sure to speak with a financial advisor. Until next time, I'm Anthony Pastore. Have a great day, everybody, and remember to keep your eyes on what's trending. We'll see you soon.